25 individuals, including 2 current senior White House officials, were granted security clearances or access to national security information despite recommendations to deny their applications. This, according to a list made by an employee of the White House Personnel Office. Tricia Newbold, who spoke to the House Oversight Committee in a private interview where they identified her as a whistleblower. The New York Times reporting, quote, Ms. Newbold told the committee's staff members that the clearance applications have been denied for a variety of reasons, including foreign influence, conflicts of interest concerning personal conduct, financial problems, drug use, and criminal conduct. The denials by career employees were overturned, she said, by more senior officials who did not follow the procedures designed to mitigate security risks, which fits with previous New York Times reporting where we learned the president ordered Jared Kushner's clearance despite objections from intelligence officials. From that report, quote, the clearance had been held up in part over questions from the FBI and the CIA about his foreign and business contacts, including those related to Israel, the UAE, and Russia. That's according to multiple people familiar with the events. Chairman Cummings also wrote a letter to White House counsel Pat Cipollone, increasing pressure on the White House to cooperate with his ongoing investigation into the security clearance process. In light of the grave reports from this whistleblower and the ongoing refusal of the White House to provide the information we need to conduct our investigation, the committee now plans to proceed with a compulsory process and begin authorizing subpoenas starting at tomorrow's business meeting. Everyone is still here. Chuck Rosenberg, this has long felt like the looming national security crisis, that the people in charge of these background checks are blind to partisanship. They're blind to nepotism. Usually don't have to say that when you talk about the White House Security Clearance Office, but in this case you do. They render judgments that in most normal White Houses are the last word on these background checks. Clearly not so in the Trump White House.
That's right. We asked nonpartisan professionals to do the background investigations. We asked nonpartisan professionals to adjudicate those investigations. Look, I've been through the process many times. It can be maddening. It's laborious, right? It takes a long time. And by the way, in every administration, there are people who fall out of the process, right? They can't get through it. The red flags go up, they're told, and they politely and discreetly walk away from whatever job they were hoping to get. That said, it's also not unusual maybe once, maybe twice, to clear somebody who might otherwise have difficulty because they're uniquely talented or they have a particular expertise. But 25? That's extraordinary. And it continues to show, I think, by this administration, a disdain for the normal processes of government, which in this case can be dangerous to our national security.
And let's be honest, I'm sure this wasn't your issue, but mine was college drug use. And the questions that hold up an application for added scrutiny are usually not foreign contacts. They're usually not red flags raised by the CIA. They're usually some report from a college friend that the FBI knocks on the door in interviews, and they ask you if, did you answer all these questions? I mean, let's just be honest about the scope of concerns. They usually aren't red flags from the intelligence community.
Right. They're usually more minor. And by the way, whatever your issue or other issues may have been, Nicole, you answered honestly.
I did, to Robert Mueller, no less, but that's another story for another day.
but you answered honestly, and answering honestly is a big deal because if there is an issue and it's a minor one, answering dishonestly excludes you, and answering honestly means that you can be cleared. And so what we want to know about your credit history or your criminal background or your drug use can always be mitigated, and people with minor nicks and dents can get through the process. But to your point, extensive foreign contacts, and particularly extensive foreign contacts that you fail to report, that is a deeply troubling trend. And those types of people should never be cleared by nonpartisan professionals. They needed to go another level higher. They needed the politicals to weigh in and to overrule the nonpartisan professionals. And that is dangerous.
And Robert Costa, because my mother might see this, it was just marijuana, but let's keep going. On the Trump White House security clearance question, Republicans, when they controlled these committees, had concerns. There were flags raised inside and outside the White House that caught the attention when these committees, which became very political in the first 2 years of Trump's presidency, were run by Republicans like Trey Gowdy. This really seems like an Achilles heel. You've also got Trump loyalist Don McGahn, Trump loyalist John Kelly, who were so troubled by the practices around the security clearance process that they penned memos to the file around what they viewed as abuses.
It's a significant development to have this whistleblower who was inside of the process, because as reporters, we have been biting around the edges, searching for answers for over 2 years, trying to figure out why were some of these security clearances blocked. What did the president say when he made the decision to override those decisions? Was it just about college drug use, or was it something about foreign context? And getting context for the foreign context is critical to understand what was actually happening with these clearances. Now that Congress is getting some answers, some fresh answers, maybe we can understand more what was the president doing when he waved these clearances through. How significant was that decision?
And Aaron Blake, your colleagues, yours and Robert's colleagues at the Washington Post have been on this since the earliest days of the Trump presidency. In July of 2017, reporting why Jared Kushner has had to update his disclosure of foreign contacts more than once. Also writing about Kushner's overseas contacts, raising concerns as foreign officials seek leverage. Jared Kushner has been I don't know what's beyond a red flag, I guess a flashing purple flag with a siren since the beginning.
Yeah, and Chuck talked about how this process can be frustrating. It can take a long time. I think that the general consensus with Kushner is that it took an exceedingly large amount of time. Now, the question from there was this just a symptom of the fact that this is a guy with a lot of different business interests, a lot of different international ties that needed to be figured out? We don't really know the answer to that question. We also don't know whether this whistleblower was referring specifically to Jared Kushner in some of the things that we found out, but it's not difficult to draw those conclusions. I think it's also important to put this in the context of everything we've seen over the last 2 years. This is not the first time that the White House has been reported to be doing things with its information that seem to pose potential national security threats. We, of course, had the president talking with Russians in the Oval Office, giving them classified information. Michael Flynn being kept in the White House after they were told for a couple weeks that he might be compromised because he had lied to them. The president's cell phone use, the idea that the Russians and the Chinese are actually listening in to the president when he's using an unsecured cell phone. There are all kinds of these things that point to kind of a cavalier attitude towards national security in certain ways when it's not very convenient for them. And a lot of that flies into the face of what we saw from the president when he was campaigning against Hillary Clinton, of course.
Heidi.
The big news today, though, is that this is way more than Kushner, right? This is 25 people, and this is systemic in that the White House, officials within the White House, political officials, are overruling and changing longstanding protocol and forcing career people like this to basically make approvals that they've said should not be made. And Nicole, this is something, just to be clear, that has been bipartisan concern. For 2 years, the Democrats and Republicans on the committees on the Hill have been writing these letters trying to get more information, and they've essentially been stonewalled. You're seeing it now because the Democrats are actually acting on it, but this has also been a concern for Republicans as well.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.